Hello everyone, and welcome. I hope this story gives you a chance to relax and unwind after a busy day. If you enjoy stories like this, please support the channel with a like, a share, and a subscription. Your support truly means a lot to me, and it gives me the motivation to keep growing this channel and bringing you more entertaining and enjoyable stories. Thank you so much for being here, and now, let's begin the story. At Gray March, the roads mattered more than speeches. Leah Stroud had spent 15 years driving Gray March's roads. She knew what arrived on time, what arrived late, and what never arrived at all. She knew which districts went quiet when filters failed and which blocks turned desperate when the heat packs ran out. On Gray March, freight was often the only thin line between a frightened neighborhood and a broken one. On the night everything changed, Leah backed her long-haul carrier toward Dock Lane 6 at Brink Yard under a dull copper sky. Gray March was a working colony. Earth labor kept most of it standing, and alien administrators kept most of the records. Leah was 42, careful with her hands, and patient in the hard way freight demanded. Her rig carried the practical things that kept districts alive. That week, 3 Earth districts on the industrial rim had been cut to reduced energy allotments after a quota dispute. The result was simple and ugly. Old people slept in coats, and shift crews washed in cold water. Leah had spent 2 days hauling emergency supplies and could feel the fatigue behind her eyes. So when the dispatcher tagged her next run as priority civilian stabilization, she did not like the phrase, but she understood the urgency. Priority meant people were waiting. Davin Quill, Brink Yard's route manager, stood under the floodlights with a slate in one hand and a thermal mug in the other. He had the polished calm of a man who never had to unload his own decisions. "You're taking a sealed package run," he said as Leah hopped down from her cab. "What kind of sealed package?" "Household stabilization kit deployment." "That's not a kind. That's a phrase." Quill did not smile. "District deliveries. North Set Row, Calder, Spine, and Hollow Crest. Straight route. No stops except standard safety. Escort vehicle will shadow until the last drop." Leah looked past him. 2 security crawlers idled near the loading bay. That alone felt wrong. Security shadow for medical agents or hazardous chemical loads made sense. Security shadow for household supplies did not. How many pallets? 24 modular units. What weight class? Declared as mixed civic support. Declared, Leah repeated. Quill tapped the slate. "Leah, it's late. Those districts need support, and the colony administration wants this clean. Get it delivered." She turned toward the freight line. Yard crews were already bringing the units in with clamp forks. The containers were too clean for relief stock. Real relief stock looked desperate even before it left the yard. Scratch bins, repacked membranes, water cartridges in ugly stacks. These looked expensive. She walked one slow circle around the first pallet. Civilian code stamp on the manifest plate. Administrative seal on the clamp lock. New tamper stripe. Old routing tag underneath. The mismatch hit her instantly because freight work trained the eye before it trained the mind. What happened to the original routing? Quill's expression tightened by half a degree. Reclassification. By whom? Central coordination. That answer means you don't want to say. It means I don't need to. Leah looked at the destination codes again. North Set Row, Calder Spine, Hollow Crest, all Earth districts. All 3 had filed labor complaints in the last 2 months. The wrongness deepened. "You're sending admin-sealed equipment into the same 3 districts that already think somebody's tightening a hand around their throat," Leah said. "I'm sending support equipment to places under strain." "Then why does it need this much shadow?" Quill took a sip from his mug. "Because the colony is tense, and the council liaison wants no disruptions." That landed heavier than the rest. Galaxy Council authority did not usually sink its claws into one freight run unless the freight meant more than the manifest claimed. Leah said nothing for a moment. Yard workers were watching while pretending not to. "You've got another driver if you don't want the questions," she said. "I've got other drivers. I don't have another driver who can get this through the industrial rim without losing half the night." That was almost a compliment. On Gray March, compliments often sounded like burdens and better clothes. Leah signed for the load because the districts did need something. And because if she refused too early, Quill would hand the freight to a less careful driver, and the whole thing would vanish into the night. But once the units were locked into her carrier bed, she made herself a quiet promise. She would not deliver anything she did not understand. The route out of Brink Yard cut past heat towers, shuttered fabrication halls, and the long concrete ribs of transport viaducts built before the colony learned how much red dust could eat through untreated joints. Leah drove with the window sensors dimmed and the engine hum low under her seat. Behind her, the escort crawlers kept exact distance. That bothered her too. Security crews normally grew lazy on empty roads. These did not. At milepost 9, she took the standard mechanical check stop she was entitled to under ground haul safety law. One crawler moved up immediately. "Route stop not advised," said the security voice through external comm. "Mechanical stop required," Leah answered. "Unless you want the actual report filed in your name." There was a pause. Freight law still mattered enough that people pretended to respect it. The crawler backed off. Milepost 9 was little more than a repair shed, a vending wall, and 3 service bays. Orrin Pike looked up from an open-wall housing when Leah rolled in. He was lean, graying at the temples, and permanently coated with some layer of grease or carbon dust. He had known Leah nearly as long as she had driven the route. "You look like you swallowed a blade," he said. "I've got a sealed run that stinks." That narrows it down to most sealed runs. She jerked her head toward the carrier. "Check the load spread." Orrin wiped his hands and grabbed his scanner. They walked the vehicle together while the 2 security crawlers idled beyond the bay line. Orrin frowned after the first sweep. "Not food. Not water packs, either." "What is it?" "Dense electronics. Modular. A lot of idle shielding. Thermal behavior says half the units are sleeping processors. For household support." He gave her a flat look. "If households are running a surveillance grid, sure." Leah said nothing, but her jaw tightened. Orrin made another pass, then tapped a panel line. "Weight is wrong for relief. Balance is wrong too. Whoever packed this wanted stability under hard braking, not easy unloading. Meaning they expected resistance or delay, and they didn't want the modules shifting if somebody got stupid on the road." Leah remembered another emergency route 2 years earlier that ended with a worker's block on punitive power rationing under soft administrative language. She had never proved the link, but she had never forgotten it either. Freight drivers almost never proved anything. They noticed, remembered, and kept going. "What if I open one?" she asked. Orrin stared at her for a long second. "Then tonight becomes more expensive. It already feels expensive." He glanced toward the crawler lights, then toward the old maintenance shutter at the back of the bay. "Rear camera has a blind patch if it glitches. I can make it glitch for 40 seconds. After that, I was checking your brake lines and minding my own business." Leah looked at him. "You know that puts your name next to mine. My name's been next to yours in enough service logs already. If this is bad, better to know now." Orrin gave the camera its polite little accident. Leah moved fast. She used a pry key from her cab kit, slipped past the outer latch on one auxiliary crate, and cracked the lid just enough to shine her hand torch inside. What she saw was enough to tell her this was not help for tired households. Rows of compact sensor nodes. Utility governor locks. Data relay fins. Everything inside looked built to monitor, limit, and control. All of it was labeled with neutral civic language that tried to make coercion sound like maintenance. At the bottom sat a slim document cartridge, and Leah pulled it free. The code strip read Civic Stability Mesh. Not relief. Not support. Control hardware. She did not need a policy degree to understand the shape of it. Install those systems block by block, then tie heat, water, movement permissions, and supply priority to a district score. Call it stabilization. Call it optimization. It was still a hand around the throat, just one wearing gloves. The 40 seconds ended. Orrin swore softly as he forced the lid back down. "What is it?" "Something they can use to decide who gets enough power, who gets enough water, and which blocks get squeezed if they complain." "That official enough for you?" "Too official." Orrin handed the cartridge back to her. "If you keep driving, you become the one who laid it on their doorstep." Leah looked at the dark road ahead. North Set Row. Called her spine. Hollow crest. People there were waiting for help. Real help. If she vanished with the freight, they might think she had stolen their chance at warmth. If she delivered it, she would help build the cage. That was the real shape of work on Grey March. Most cruelties arrived disguised as practical choices. She tucked the cartridge inside her jacket. I'm not delivering this blind, she said. And when Central asks why, I'll tell them the load lied to me first. Back in the cab, she sat with both hands on the wheel and felt the decision settle into her bones. It did not feel brave. It felt costly. Brave was a word people used after the danger had already turned in memory. Leah keyed the comm and called Brinkyard Central. Davin Quill answered on the third tone. Status. Load discrepancy. Declare manifest does not match physical indicators. Request hold authority pending verification. Silence. Then denied. That was quick. This route is under executive priority. By whom? Colony Administration and Council Liaison Office. Leah looked out at the security crawlers. Then they could be the ones to explain why household support needs dynamic utility locks and relay processors. Another silence, sharper this time. You opened a sealed unit. I inspected a freight irregularity. You exceeded authority. I prevented blind delivery of undeclared control equipment into 3 Earth districts. Quill's voice cooled into something almost smooth. Leah, you are a ground haul operator. You're not policy review. This is not your lane. My lane is what rolls into those districts. Complete the route. No, be very careful with that answer. You should have been careful with a manifest. Quill exhaled slowly. If this load fails deployment, the colony will hold Earth carriers responsible for obstructing a stabilizing measure during a live resource strain. There it is, Leah said. Stabilizing measure. You have 1 hour to deliver before breach penalties activate. Then activate them. She cut the line. For 5 full seconds she sat in silence, aware that some threshold had just gone behind her. Oren stepped up to the cab. You sure? No. She looked at him. But I'm done pretending wrong freight is just freight. He nodded once. Then don't drift. If you do this, do it clean. Leah pulled out of milepost 9 with the escort crawlers tightening behind her. She did not head straight to Ash Span yet. First, she needed to see the faces waiting at the first district and understand what this lie would cost in the open. By the time she reached the edge of North Set Row, half the block was already awake. The district sat under tired concrete towers and bad lights. A small crowd waited at the gate with the hungry focus of people who needed the truck in front of them to contain exactly what the paperwork promised. Leah saw an old woman she had delivered filters to last month. She saw 2 dockhands from Calder Spine and a pair of exhausted shift medics leaning on a barricade rail. A district marshal waved her toward the unloading bay. Leah did not turn in. She rolled past the gate and stopped just beyond it. Faces changed at once, and the marshal walked fast to her window. Why aren't you unloading? What do they tell you this run is? Emergency household support. Why? What if it isn't? The marshal's stare hardened. This district does not need philosophy, driver. It needs the load. People were coming closer now. Leah opened the door and climbed down because some conversations needed to happen at eye level. My name is Leah Stroud, she said loudly enough for the front row to hear. I drive this route. I know what relief freight looks like. This is not relief freight. Someone shouted from the back. Then what is it? I'm still confirming. That was the wrong answer for hungry people under bad lights. The mood turned immediately. A dock worker Leah recognized from previous runs jabbed a finger at the carrier. You got warm units in there? No. Water membranes? No. Then why are you holding us up? Because I think this load is meant to control your district, not help it. Several people blinked at her as if she had switched languages. The marshal folded his arms. Speak plain. Leah did. I think what's in this truck can be used to decide who gets enough power, who gets enough water, and which blocks get squeezed if they complain. A laugh came from somewhere in the crowd. Bitter, unbelieving. So now you're our political savior? Another voice called. No, Leah said. I'm the woman with the truck, and I'm telling you the truck is wrong. The crowd did not need a savior. It needed heat. She could feel the split opening in real time. Some faces moved toward wary attention. others toward anger. She hated that. Systems loved forcing people to choose between their immediate need and the truth behind it. One of the shift medics stepped forward. "If you're right, what happens if you drive away?" "They replace me," Leah said. "And if I'm careful, maybe I stop them long enough to prove what this is. And if you're wrong, then I become the reason your district waited." That answer was honest enough to hurt. No one thanked her. They should not have. She was not solving their night. She was making it harder. Leah climbed back into the cab and drove on, carrying the weight of their anger with the load. That was when private suspicion became something larger. If she wanted to stop this, she would have to stop it in public, where everyone waiting for relief could watch her become the villain first. She drove toward Harrow Lot because a message had flashed on her dash a minute after she left North Set Row. It said the sender knew what civic stability mesh was and told her to stop at Harrow Lot alone. She almost ignored it. Freight work taught caution better than trust. But the sender had used an old inspection routing code no one outside Yard Review should have known. At Harrow Lot, under a dead billboard and 3 broken flood lamps, Mira Seln waited in the shadow of an abandoned loader frame. She was stocky, sharp-eyed, and dressed like someone trying not to be remembered. "You're late," Mira said. "You're secretive. I used to work manifest review for district deployment." "Used to?" "They moved me after I asked what civic stability mesh actually meant." Leah got out, but kept the cab door open. "Give me the short version." Mira handed her a thin data slip. "This is the deleted annex from your route package. The public file says household support. The hidden file links installation priority to unrest markers, petition history, labor aggregation, and non-compliant utility use." Leah read the first page, then the second. The language was bloodless. Population responsiveness, adaptive service modulation, behavioral dampening through distribution responsiveness. It was all there. Score the district. Reduce allocations where needed. Restrict movement by permit priority. Use daily hardship to wear down organized resistance. "They want to starve resistance into exhaustion," Leah said. "They want to manage it before it becomes visible," Mira answered. "Cleaner. Easier to deny. Easier to call administrative." "Who signed?" "Asked her Compact Civic Governance Board. Co-approved by Colony Administration through Emergency Stability Authority." "Solada." Myra's mouth tightened. "And others." "But yes," Administrator Arden opened the door. Leah looked up. "Why tell me?" "Because they thought drivers wouldn't notice. And because drivers notice everything." The words settled hard and true. Far out beyond Harrow Lot, freight lanes stretched across the colony like dull veins under the copper dark. Everything Gray March needed moved along them. If the lanes carried food, people lived. If the lanes carried restraints, people obeyed or paid. Leah folded the annex and put it in her jacket beside the cartridge. "Then I don't drive another meter," she said. Mira glanced toward the road. "If you stop alone, they bury you as a difficult employee." Leah looked at the carrier in the dust, at the load on its back, at 15 years of route memory lining up behind her like all the miles that had taught her how a system really spoke. "No," she said. "If I stop right, they have to answer me first." Ashspan was the bridge junction where the industrial rim fed 3 district roads and 1 northbound resource lane. It was ugly, patched, and unavoidable. If a driver wanted to slow a colony without touching a civilian door, that was where she did it. Leah rolled onto the center approach just before dawn. Then she killed the engine. The escort crawlers surged forward, lights hardening. She climbed down, took the old mechanical lock bar from her side compartment, and ran it through the carrier's rear axle latch in full sight of the cameras. What she did next made the night impossible to shrink back into paperwork. She opened the public route channel used by haulers, loaders, dispatch clerks, service crews, and every driver too tired to bother with official language. "This is Leah Stroud on Ashspan," she said. "Priority civilian load from Brink Yard is not civilian relief. I repeat, this is not relief freight. It is district control equipment under a false manifest. I am locking the load and holding position." For one breath, the whole channel stayed silent. Then voices hit at once. Some furious, some confused, some already asking for proof. Leah gave them the only proof that mattered in the first minute. Check the destination list against petition districts. Check the escort class. Check the utility governor make. Ask why household support needs adaptive control locks. By the time Central tried to cut her channel, the message had already gone too wide. Across Gray March, drivers started asking questions at their own docks. That was the moment the colony stopped being able to treat her as one woman with a bad attitude. That was the moment the roads themselves began listening. By mid-morning, Ashspan was no longer a bridge. It was an argument visible from orbit. Traffic stacked in both directions. Service trams stopped below. Loaders idled with hazard lights flashing. Drivers gathered on the shoulder, arguing over route law and over the simpler truth that hungry districts did not care about principles if principles replaced heat and water. Leah stayed beside her rig because retreat would make it easier for other people to rename what she was doing. She had chosen a public place for a reason. If they dragged her away, everyone needed to see it. If they lied, everyone needed to know when the lie had begun. Central sent 3 messages in 10 minutes telling her to stand down, unlock the load, and stop interfering with emergency colony stabilization. She answered only once, then published the manifest annex. They did not answer that at all. Ronan Vale arrived before noon in a battered cooperative crawler. Thick-handed and slow to trust, he chaired the drivers' cooperative when politics required everyone to pretend it was not a union. He looked at the locked axle, then at the security line that had formed at the east ramp. "You planning to start a war with one truck?" he asked. "No, I'm planning to stop one." "What do you have?" Leah handed him the annex and the code strip from the cartridge. Ronan read both in silence, his mouth flattening by the line. "Could be administrative overreach," he said at last. "Could be a choke collar with nice labels. Same family." He studied her face. "You know, they're going to make this about insubordination. They can try. They'll also make it about hungry districts." "I know." Ronan looked back at the bridge. "That part will work better." It was the hardest truth in the whole mess. Systems built their strongest shield out of the people already under pressure. If North Set row froze because the bridge stayed blocked, colony administration would not feel that first. Leah would. Ronan folded the annex twice and slipped it into his coat. "I can't call a work stop on one woman's word." "I'm not asking for one." "What are you asking for?" "Ask the drivers at Brink Yard if any other route got reclassified without weight correction. Ask the unload crews if they were denied internal scans. Ask the district service clerks why the governor locks in that load are the same make they used in South Flare." After the overtime revolt, Ronan's eyes sharpened. South Flare wasn't proven. Nothing is proven until enough tired people compare memories. That landed. Freight workers lived inside memory because official records usually arrived after the damage had already chosen its victims. Ronan said, "If I find out you're wrong, I walk away. If I'm wrong, you should." He gave one curt nod and headed back toward his crawler. The first real blow landed an hour later. Colony administration released a statement naming Leah as the sole cause of a dangerous delay. It avoided civic stability mesh, called the load adaptive utility support, and praised Earth labor while isolating one Earth driver as reckless. Leah read the statement off a dockworker's handheld and felt an ugly admiration for the craftsmanship. Whoever wrote it knew exactly how to sound reasonable while putting a person on the road to destruction. Then Northset Row started transmitting their own anger. Then footage of Leah passing the Northset Row gate flooded the colony feeds. By afternoon, people were calling her coward, saboteur, and enemy of her own neighbors. Others defended her, which made her into a symbol faster than she wanted. Leah had no interest in becoming a symbol. Symbols did not sleep in cabs or lose route pay. Symbols did not have service technicians questioned because they had been decent enough to help. Symbols did not wake up knowing old women in Northset Row still had cold pipes because of a decision made at their own hands. She did not move from the truck. Miraselm arrived on foot from the North Service path carrying 2 data slates and a face that suggested she had not slept either. "They've started scrubbing archive access," she said. "Of course they have. I got out what I could before they realized I was copying route comparisons." She spread the slates on the carrier bed. One showed district maps. The other showed service actions across 6 months. Leah did not need more than a minute to see the shape. Petition districts, work stoppage zones, blocks with repeated labor complaints. Every cluster tagged for first-wave installation sat directly on top of those same neighborhoods. They're not just watching hotspots, Leah said. They're building the hotspots into the supply model. Mira nodded. The scoring isn't a reaction. It's preemption. Lower score, more friction. Slower permit approval. Lower utility tolerance. More service audits. Fewer movement exceptions. Enough little cuts, and you don't need a riot squad. You don't even need an official punishment, Mira said. People start managing themselves to avoid the next shortage. Leah looked out over the halted lanes. That's what they want Earth to practice first. That's what they want everyone to practice eventually, Mira said. Earth is the pilot because Earth neighborhoods have enough internal organization to matter and not enough upper-level leverage to refuse. They made the whole thing worse and clearer. Gray March was not a backwater accident. Gray March was a test site. Human districts were being used to teach a larger system how obedience could be pulled out of logistics instead of force. Who else knows? Leah asked. Some admin planners. Asked her compact civic board. Solarda. Maybe the council liaison office if they asked the right questions. Maybe. Mira gave her a tired look. Big systems are built on layers of maybe. That's how everyone keeps their hands clean. By dusk, the colony made another move. Leah's driving certification was suspended pending stability review. Her wage account was frozen. Her carrier was legally requisitioned, though the order could not be enforced because the bridge remained blocked and too many cameras were watching. A polite notice informed her that continued interference could expose her to civil liability for district harm. That one hurt more than the others. Liability for district harm. The phrase fit too well. Leah knew the hunger in those neighborhoods. She knew the cold. She knew every delay multiplied inside homes that colony administration never visited. She could resist the official threat. Resisting the possibility that she might be harming her own people was harder. That night Leah sat in the dark cab while drivers rotated on the shoulder. No formal strike had been called, but enough haulers were holding. Connecting routes on safety grounds that freight flow across the industrial rim had already fallen sharply. Leah rested her forehead against the wheel. For a few minutes, fatigue made every conviction feel theatrical and every doubt feel practical. A knock on the cab door snapped her upright. Orrin Pike climbed in after she unlocked it. He smelled like machine oil and cold air. They took my bay access for the rest of the week, he said. Leah closed her eyes once. I'm sorry. Don't do that. Makes it sound like I tripped by accident. They targeted you because of me. They targeted me because I still know the difference between freight and fiction. He handed her a paper cup of reheated broth from somewhere down the line. Drink this before your hands start shaking. She took the cup. You should not be here. You saying that because you care or because you think I listen? Both. Orrin sat back. Ronan found 3 more route changes matching your pattern. 2 from Brink. 1 from East Cutter. All toward Earth districts under review. Leah drank the broth. It was terrible. It steadied her anyway. He backing us? She asked. He's backing verification. That's his version of courage. Leah almost smiled. Orrin's face lost its edge. North Set Row got 2 emergency heaters for volunteer stock. Not enough. But they aren't blind anymore. Some of them started asking what was really on your truck. That helps, and it doesn't. It's a start. The next A brought the other kind of blow, the one systems prefer because it arrived wrapped in concern. Administrator Sol Arden requested a direct conversation. He came to Ashspan under a neutral flag and spoke with the careful calm of an Earth official who had spent too many years beside alien power. Ms. Stroud, he said, stopping a few feet from the locked axle. You've made your point. That depends on what point you think I made. The colony is under strain. External partners offered a governance support framework to prevent wider resource collapse. It was not handled well. I can concede that. Can you concede what it does? Arden glanced toward the cameras. I can concede that deployment should have included more district consultation. Leah let that sit between them. Consultation. This does not need to become a spectacle. It became a spectacle when you mislabeled control hardware as household support. Arden's gaze hardened just enough to show the iron beneath the diplomacy. Gray March needs stability more than it needs rhetorical purity. There it is, Leah said quietly. You all keep saying stability like the word forgives what you load under it. He did not answer that. Instead, he changed tactics. If you unlock the vehicle, I can secure a review. Quietly, the districts will get immediate replacement aid. Your certification suspension can be reconsidered. The cooperative will not be pressed further. You can stop this from becoming larger than necessary. Larger than necessary. Leah almost admired the audacity. The architecture of obedience was already large enough to wrap around whole neighborhoods. But when one driver stopped it in public, suddenly size became the problem. You already made it larger than necessary, she said. You made hunger into an argument for putting collars on people's utilities. Arden's expression cooled. You speak as if I enjoy any of this. Do you? Something flickered in his face. Weariness. Shame. Or only irritation at being asked plainly. I enjoy keeping the colony alive, he said. Earth workers on Gray March are exhausted, underprovided, and one bad quarter from losing more than you understand. Astor Compact offered infrastructure funds, dot priority, and emergency power stabilization. Nothing comes free. You know that as well as I do. I know that every deal made over desperate people is introduced as temporary. This one could have bought time. For what? Arden did not answer at once. There it was. The silence. The small exposed nerve under the polished speech. He had taken the deal because he believed Gray March was too weak to negotiate cleanly. Maybe he even believed he was choosing the least brutal option available. Systems survived on people who could live with that thought. Leah said, You sold a habit, not a bridge. Arden looked away toward the halted freight line. If this reaches the council chamber in full glare, you may win your point and lose the colony's leverage for a decade. If this reaches the districts in silence, they lose more than leverage. He studied her for one last moment, then turned and left without shaking her hand. When he was gone, Mira said from behind the carrier, That's the first honest thing he's done. He let you see he's afraid. Of me? No, Mira said. Of what happens if the council has to say out loud what Earth neighborhoods are considered acceptable places to test compliance infrastructure. Ronan Vale made his choice the following morning. He arrived with 6 carrier rigs and parked them nose to tail behind Leah's vehicle on the western approach. No vanus, no chance, no speeches, just haulers standing down under safety hold, each one citing route uncertainty and undeclared civic harbor protocols. No formal strike, not yet, but everyone understood what it was. Ashban stopped being Leah's problem and became Gray March's question. The colony answered by escalating. Security officers detained 2 yard workers for manifest interference. Orrin Pike was called again for questioning. Myra's archive access was fully revoked. Colony media ran a segment on freight panic and the dangers of anti-administrative rumor. Then, in a move so clumsy it almost helped Leah, the Council Liaison Office demanded a rapid evidentiary review under Galaxy Council civic governance standards. They had meant to crush the issue upward, where language became slower and more expensive and ordinary workers lost their footing. Instead, they made the issue impossible to bury inside colony procedure. Galaxy Council review meant records. It meant comparison. It meant somebody beyond Gray March would now have to say what this load really was. Leah heard the notice over open channel while sitting on her carrier step with a wrench in her lap and dust working into every seam of her boots. Mira let out a breath beside her. They think chamber procedure will break you. It might. Then let's make sure it breaks them too. That night, under bridge lights and parked freight, Leah looked down the line of idle rigs and understood something she had not let herself name before. This was no longer about proving she had been right to stop one delivery. It was about proving that the smallest working hands in a system were not obligated to finish the lie simply because larger hands had planned it. The chamber would come next. But before the chamber came the cost. The cost arrived at sunrise. A clinic runner from Calderspine came up the shoulder in a borrowed maintenance cart, waving for Leah before the cart had fully stopped. The runner was out of breath and furious. Your hold triggered a backup on thermal patch distribution, she said. Our clinic got delayed by 6 hours. 2 recovery wards had to combine heating. Leah stood. Was anyone lost? No, but don't ask me that like it fixes the rest. It doesn't. The runner stared at her, seeing not the grand politics of control systems, but the immediate and ugly arithmetic of a colony under strain. If you're going to do this, you better be right all the way. Leah nodded once. I know. When the runner left, Leah stayed still with the words lodged inside her. Good people trying to stop a worse harm still caused harm while machine was grinding. There was no clean version. Ronan came up beside her. You're taking that hard. I should. You should take it seriously. Different thing. Leah looked at the halted lines, then at the city beyond. If this ends with districts colder and the hardware still deployed, then I did nothing but make everyone suffer louder. Ronan grunted. Then don't let it end there. By afternoon, the cooperative had enough route comparisons to prove pattern duplication across multiple Earth districts. Nadia Voss arrived from Earth Administrative Council with hard copies, legal scorn, and the expression of a woman who had spent the shuttle ride deciding how much of the room she was willing to burn down. She found Leah under the bridge shadow, reading district comments off a public feed. You Leah Stroud? Nadia asked. Depends who's asking. Nadia Voss. Earth Council. I'm the reason nobody has physically hauled you off your truck yet. Leah looked her over. Good to meet you too. Nadia crouched beside the carrier bed and started laying out document strips in neat rows. The council review is moving to LYR station under Civic Chamber authority, not a criminal tribunal, a compliance validation proceeding. That sounds worse. It's more dangerous, Nadia said. Worse depends on who prepared. Mira joined them. If they frame it as governance optimization, we lose ground before the first question. Nadia nodded. Then we do not let them frame it first. Leah looked from one woman to the other. One was archive grit and stolen annexes. The other was legal precision sharpened for institutional blood. Leah herself was a driver with cold dust on her coat. That combination felt improbable enough to work. Nadia said, I've reviewed what you released. You made one very good move. Which one? You forced the issue into public logistics instead of private procedure. Chamber officials now have to deal with actual route evidence, not just administrative theory. Leah shrugged. I blocked a bridge. Yes, Nadia said. Exactly. Leah still did not trust lawyers as a category. Freight workers usually met law at the point where law had already decided something expensive about their lives. But Nadia did not talk like a woman trying to cool a room. She talked like someone who preferred rooms a little scorched. Tell me what happens on LYR station, Leah said. Nadia stacked the documents. Best case, the chamber freezes deployment and opens a systems inquiry. Better case, it also forces disclosure of the scoring criteria and chain of approval. Worst case, they classify the architecture as lawful emergency support and make your obstruction the issue. Can they do that? They could try. Systems call that order. Leah looked down at the lock bar through her rear axle. And me? She asked. What am I there for? Nadia met her eyes. You are there because they built this plan on the assumption that labor sees pieces and authority sees the whole. You're going to explain that labor sees the whole first. That line stayed with Leah through the next day and the next, as Ash Span slowly shifted from blockade to staging ground. The fight was leaving the bridge, but it was still the same fight. What had been hidden inside? Freight would now be argued in a polished room far from the road. Leah understood that if she failed there, the same hardware could come back with cleaner language and better timing. The official summons came on the 4th morning. Galactic Council Civic Chamber of LYR Station required the attendance of relevant Earth representatives and direct actors connected to the disputed deployment event. Direct actors. Leah had been given many names in the last several days. Driver, saboteur, worker, liar, whistleblower, threat. It was almost funny that the chamber called her an actor, as if she had chosen a role and rehearsed the lines. Earth administration wanted Nadia to go to LYR station without Leah. The cooperative refused, And so did Northset Row once the annex summary spread. They still blamed Leah for the delay, but they no longer wanted anyone to speak for them without the driver who had stopped the load. So Leah went. She left Gray March from the North lift pad in a plane transfer shuttle with Nadia, Mira, and 2 Earth administrative aides who behaved as if she smelled like a procedural complication. The shuttle rose through the copper atmosphere, and the colony shrank into grids, towers, and pale scars where mining cuts had once promised prosperity. Leah looked down until the dust and lights became abstract. She had always known Gray March's roads. From above, it looked like an organism pinned open, every service line showing. LYR Station did not feel like Gray March at all. It was clean in the way power liked to be clean. Curved corridors, quiet flooring, light panels that never flickered, air without machine grit. The civic chamber occupied one spoke of the station, a space built to make procedure feel civilized and irresistible. Leah hated on sight. Nadia leaned toward her before entry check. Listen carefully. Do not let them drag you into terminology you don't own. When you don't know a chamber word, say so and go back to what you physically saw. Freight, seals, route shifts, utility locks, service deprivation patterns. You're strongest there. I'm weakest everywhere else. That's fine. They're weakest there too. That's why they bury things under. Better language. Leah gave a low breath that might have become a laugh under less pressure. You do enjoy this. I enjoy rooms where polite people realize the ugly thing has their name on it. Then the doors opened, and Leah Stroud walked into the place where Gray March's roads would have to become speakable to a larger civilization. The chamber rose in careful tiers of glass and dark metal. No one shouted. No one needed to. It had been built to imply that noise belonged to lesser places, and Gray March was one of those places. Prefect Kalamar sat with the Aster Compact delegation 3 tiers up, narrow-faced, and perfectly composed. Some people wore calm like maturity. Mar wore it like insulation. The presiding chamber moderator, an elder representative from a neutral trade bloc, opened the proceeding in language that tried to make the subject sound technical rather than human. Disputed deployment framework. Resource stabilization governance. Emergency administrative thresholds. Leah listened for nearly 2 minutes before she understood the first battle would be over nouns. Nadia Voss understood the same thing. When a moderator invited opening classification statements, she stood and said, Earth can test the characterization of this deployment as stabilization support. The evidence shows targeted installation of civic control hardware into specific human districts under false civilian manifest. Before we discuss legality, the chamber must decide whether deception can still be called governance. That's sharp in the room. Good. Prefect Mar did not rise immediately. He let the line settle, then stood with perfect patience. Aster Compact rejects the theatrics of coercion language, he said. Gray March has experienced repeated service strain, labor unrest, and infrastructure vulnerability. The disputed hardware package was designed to produce responsive distribution efficiency and prevent cascading civil harm. Leah heard it and thought of Northset Row waiting at the gate for heaters that were not in her truck. Responsive distribution efficiency. There was again the clean phrase. The phrase that always arrived after someone had already chosen where. The burden should fall. Mark continued. Earth's own colonial administration approved phase support under emergency authority. One driver's refusal to complete a route has been inflated into a philosophical spectacle, costing the colony real time, real resources, and real public trust. That was the move. Pull the frame downward until the whole question became Leah's temperament instead of their system. Nadia answered before the moderator could narrow the point. This chamber will hear from the driver, she said, because the route itself is the evidence. If authority wishes to treat labor as invisible until blamed Earth objects. There were brief procedural objections, then neutral queries, then a request for manifest basis. Nadia supplied the declared manifest, the hidden annex, the seal mismatches, the destination pattern map, and the utility governor specifications. None of it was dramatic alone. Together, it began to form a spine. The moderator looked down toward Leah. Ms. Stroud, you were the operator assigned to the disputed delivery? Yes. You were aware that route interruption during active scarcity could worsen conditions in affected districts? Yes. And you still chose to halt the load? Yes. Explain why. Leah stood. The chamber seemed too still, too curated, and full of people who had never had to decide whether a bad shipment should still be delivered because the right people were desperate enough to welcome it. She kept Nadia's warning in mind. No chamber vocabulary she did not own. I drive district support routes on Gray March, she said. I know what relief freight looks like. I know how it's packed, how it shifts, what escort class it gets, and how manifest change when somebody tries to hide what a load really is. This shipment did not behave like relief. It behaved like control hardware under a false label. Mark tilted his head by a fraction. Behavior is not evidence. Leah looked up at him. Out on the road, behavior is the first evidence. There was a slight stir around the chamber rim. Good. Let them hear that their categories were not the only ones that mattered. She continued. The declared load class was household. Stabilization support. The cargo mass was wrong for relief. The units carried administrative security seals, and the destination list matched 3 human districts with recent labor complaints. One module contained utility governor locks, occupancy sensors, and district relays. Mars said, unauthorized inspection by a freight operator does not transform infrastructure into oppression. No, Leah said. The target list did that. Nadia gave the route map to chamber display. It expanded above the floor. Gray March, North Set Row, Calder Spine, Hollow Crest, then overlays, petition history, work stoppages, utility disputes, delayed service appeals. The clusters nearly sat on top of one another. The moderator leaned forward. Prefect Mar, did Aster Compact select deployment districts by unrest indicators? Mar did not flinch. By vulnerability indicators. Leah felt anger move through her so cleanly it almost cooled her. She said, those are the same thing if you build your system to treat complaint as instability. Mar's gaze came to her directly for the first time. Complaint becomes instability when essential infrastructure is threatened by mobilized disruption. Then maybe you should ask why those districts were mobilized at all. He ignored that and turned to the moderator. The chamber should note that Earth Colony Administration accepted first wave implementation. The claim that this was imposed externally is false. There it was. The internal fracture. Mar would not miss it because it weakened Earth's moral footing. Administrator Sol Arden appeared by relay rather than in person. Even through the chamber screen, Leah could see he looked older than he had on Ashspan. Under questioning, Arden admitted that emergency terms had been approved in exchange for short-term power stabilization credits, docking priority, and infrastructure renewal funds. He insisted the colony faced severe pressure, and he insisted the agreement was temporary. He also insisted human districts would ultimately benefit from improved service management. Leah listened to him and thought not of betrayal in the theatrical sense, but of something worse and more common. Fatigue, turning into permission. Tired leadership agreeing to a structure because it seemed more manageable than open decline. Whole futures traded for breathing room. Nadia did not try to make Arden a monster. She did something smarter. She made him ordinary. Administrator Arden, she asked, were district residents informed that utility access and movement permissions could be linked to behavioral scoring under the proposed framework? No. Were they informed that labor aggregation history informed first-wave targeting? No. Were they informed that service friction could be used to reduce organizational capacity? Arden hesitated. The language was administrative dash. Were they informed? No. Then Earth districts were expected to live under a system they had not been told how to refuse. The line hung in the chamber. Mar moved to recover. Emergency governance often requires accelerated implementation under conditions where public consultation is impracticable. Leah said before she could stop herself. Funny how consultation always becomes impracticable right when the burden falls on someone with less room to say no. The moderator did not rebuke her. That mattered. When the chamber recessed, the pressure only changed shape. Gray March feeds had turned the hearing into a referendum on hidden control. District statements, dock worker memories, and old route stories were now spilling into public view. The roads were talking now. That frightened Astor Compact more than any one speech in a chamber ever could. By the second session, Mar changed tactics. He stopped treating Leah as reckless and started treating her as limited. "Ms. Stroud," he said, "you are a ground haul operator. Is it fair to say you do not possess formal training in civic resource optimization?" Leah heard the trap and stepped into it on purpose. "That's fair. And you do not design emergency service systems?" "No." "You do not model colony collapse risk?" "No." He spread his hands slightly. "Then, by your own admission, your interpretation of these systems is based on partial understanding." Leah looked at him. Then she looked around the chamber. Then she answered in the calmest voice she had. Used all day. "My understanding is based on where systems land." There was no immediate reaction. She went on. "I do not build your models," Leah said. "But I know where the crates go, who waits for them, and what happens when power cuts keep landing on the blocks that speak up. If your training ignores the place your system touches the floor, then maybe your understanding is the partial one." That changed the air, not into triumph, into attention. Mira followed with archive evidence from 3 older deployments across 2 separate colonies. Same governor make. Same delayed disclosure language. Same pattern of friction introduced after labor unrest markers rose. The hardware family existed beyond Gray March. So did the logic. Then Nadia drove the nail deeper. She had spent the recess doing what good counsel did best. She compared procurement records against governance board memoranda and found a phrase buried in an Astor Compact planning packet. Transferable compliance substrate. She pushed it to chamber display. The moderator asked, "Prefect Mar, does this refer to the disputed architecture?" Mar did not answer immediately. Nadia said, "The chamber should note that a transferable compliance substrate is not a colony aid tool. It is a scalable governance product." There was at last. The larger shape. Gray March was not the solution. Gray March was the test. Mar recovered enough to say, "Any administrative system intended to reduce instability across diverse polities must be transferable to be useful." Leah felt the words land like cold metal. Useful. Transferable. A neat little empire built out of utility pressure and predictive scoring. She asked permission to speak again. The moderator granted it. "This wasn't built for one bad week on one colony," Leah said. "You used Gray March because we were tired enough, stretched enough, and ordinary enough to look safe. Human districts were where you planned to learn how much pressure you could apply before people stopped organizing and started managing their own fear for you." No one interrupted. Mar said, "That is rhetoric." Leah shook her head. "No, that's logistics." She stepped down to the central floor. Display, something chamber custom would not usually invite, but did not technically forbid. Nadia did not try to stop her. Good counsel knew when the witness had found the shape of her own proof. Leah pointed to the route map, then to the overlay of district complaints, then to the procurement chain. "Every system in this room depends on people like me," Leah said. "Drivers, loaders, mechanics, gate clerks. Your program still had to come through a yard, onto a carrier, and into a neighborhood. You treated labor like a blind hand. That was your mistake." She looked directly at Mar. "That was your mistake." For the first time, something very close to annoyance crossed his face. Leah went on before the chamber could soften the moment. "On Gray March, stability means heat, water, and routes that do not punish a district for speaking. You loaded restraints into a civilian truck under a false label and aimed them at the same human neighborhoods that had complained too loudly." She paused, and the chamber gave her the room to do it. "I stopped the shipment because there's always one final gate, one final axle, one final person told it is not their place to ask. If that person says yes, the system becomes real. If that person says no, the lie has to introduce itself properly." No one moved. Then Nadia, sensing exactly where the blow should land, asked Mar the question the entire proceeding had been bending toward. Would Astor Compact have disclosed the scoring criteria, utility linkage, and compliance intent to the affected human districts before full installation? Mar answered with the wrong kind of honesty. Not before operational stability was achieved. The chamber did not erupt. It did something worse for him. It understood. The moderator called an unscheduled recess. Not to calm the room. To keep the room from turning too quickly on the record. Leah remained standing on the central floor after the sound cue. Her legs felt hollow. Her throat burned. The polished quiet of the place had not become less hostile, but had become less invincible. Nadia came down beside her. That answer may have saved us a week. Leah let out a long breath. It didn't save Gray March. No, Nadia said, but it may stop Gray March from becoming a template. The final session began under a different gravity. Neutral blocks pushed for immediate suspension pending review. A labor charter representative demanded a full disclosure audit across all human districts under Aster Compact service partnerships. Even the trade moderator, who had spent most of the proceeding protecting procedural neutrality, asked whether any governance framework built on undisclosed behavioral pressure could still be classified as civil support rather than coercive administration. Mar fought. He fought elegantly, which made it uglier. He argued that all large systems used behavior-linked resource calibration, that Earth districts benefited from order, and that governance could not wait for every constituency to consent in real time. Leah saw in that argument the thing she would remember longest. Not cruelty, entitlement. The belief that systems became more legitimate the farther they stood from the bodies they constrained. When the chamber delivered its ruling, it was not theatrical. Great institutions like both their violence and their retreats to sound administrative. Galactic Council Civic Chamber ordered immediate suspension of civic stability mesh deployment on Gray March and all equivalent first-wave rollouts under Aster Compact authority pending a cross-jurisdiction inquiry into manifest deception, undisclosed compliance scoring, and service-linked behavioral governance. It further ordered disclosure of approval chains, criteria models, procurement families, and district targeting rationales. Most importantly, it stated that no system affecting core utility access, movement permissions, or supply priority within Earth communities could be implemented under emergency administration without explicit representational review from an Earth-designated authority and documented district notice. It was not everything. It was not punishment. It was not justice in the hot, clean sense angry people dreamed about when systems hurt them. But it was the thing that mattered most in that moment. The machine had been forced to name itself before continuing. Leah listened to the ruling, then to the follow-up objections, then to the scrambling procedural notes of delegations who suddenly wanted their prior cooperation described more carefully. She understood that victory in places like this rarely sounded like thunder. It sounded like officials trying to step away from their own signatures without admitting they had ever leaned in. After adjournment, Mar approached her at the outer corridor. No escort, no audience, just a man and the woman whose truck had broken his rollout sequence. "You have one a delay," he said. Leah was too tired for ceremony. "Good." He studied her as though he still could not decide whether she was trivial or dangerous. "Do you imagine this changes the underlying pressures? Colonies remain fragile. Resource systems remain vulnerable. Human districts remain difficult to stabilize." "There," Leah said. "You still hear people and think maintenance problem. I hear pattern. You hear convenience." Mar's expression did not shift. "One day your own administrators will build a version of this and call it necessary." Leah nodded once. "Then they'll have to do it over someone like me again." For the first time, his calm cracked at the edges into something like respect and something very close to dislike. Both suited her fine. He left without another word. On the shuttle back to Gray March, no one celebrated. Leah thought of what the chamber had not fixed. North Set, Roe had still spent cold nights. Oren had still paid for helping her. The ruling had not made the colony kind. It had only made one method of cruelty harder to hide. That would have to count. Gray March greeted her with dust, noise, and the complicated look of a place that had watched one of its own step into the machinery and come back different. At Brinkyard, some workers clapped once and then seemed embarrassed by it. Others nodded. A few still would not meet her eyes. Good. That meant they were real. Easy admiration would have insulted the whole thing. North Set Row sent a delegation instead of a thank you statement. 3 district representatives came to Ash Span, now reopened, and met Leah beside the same guardrail where people had cursed her. Days earlier, the oldest of them, a maintenance supervisor named Sarah Holt, said, "We were right to be angry." Leah nodded. "Yes. You were also right to stop the load." Leah nodded again. "I hope so." Sarah looked at the traffic flowing once more over the bridge. "Now I know what to watch for." That was the closest thing to gratitude Leah needed. Her certification was not restored immediately. Colony administration called for a labor conduct review. The cooperative answered by demanding route transparency clauses in every future emergency deployment, and Nadia stayed long enough to help write them. Orrin Pike got his Bay access back after 6 days and claimed there was almost enough time to make people appreciate him properly. Ronan Vale pretended he had supported the right side at exactly the right speed from the start. No one believed him. Everyone let him say it anyway. Sol Arden did not resign. That would have been too clean. He remained in office under review, which suited Leah. Systems did not rot because every person inside them was monstrous. They rotted because enough people learned to live with language that bent the floor under someone else. Weeks later, after the feeds had turned to newer crises and the ruling had already begun its slow mutation into procedure, Leah took a night route past North Set Row with actual relief freight in her carrier bed. Water membranes, heat cartridges, clinic solvents, things with no hidden processors and no civic theory inside them. At the district gate, the same marshal who had challenged her on the first night checked the seal, then stepped back and tapped the side of the truck once. "Good load?" he asked. "Good load," Leah said. He nodded and waved her through. The district remained poor, tired, and vulnerable. But now clerks checked new utility units against published specifications. Drivers compared manifests openly, and service crews tracked governor models by serial family. Gray March had not become free of control. It had become harder to control politely. Leah liked that. She parked at the unloading bay and watched workers carry real aid into real buildings. No speeches, no cameras, no chamber floor, just freight being what freight ought to be. As the last pallet came off, she leaned against the carrier and looked up at the dull copper sky over Gray March. The roads still mattered more than speeches. But now, when a polished room somewhere tried to turn obedience into infrastructure and fear into public utility policy, more people on those roads would know the sound of it. That was not a revolution. It was not even safety. It was better than silence. And for a place like Gray March, silence had always been the first thing power tried to deliver. If this story stayed with you, maybe it is because deep down we all know the same truth Leah Stroud did. Power does not always arrive with warships. Sometimes it comes quietly, hidden inside paperwork, policy, and the things we were told to deliver without question. But as long as there are still people willing to stop, look closer, and say no, humanity will never be easy to break. If Leah's stand meant something to you, please like this video, share it with someone who would feel its weight, and subscribe to the channel for more stories where humanity refuses to kneel. Thank you for being here and for listening all the way to the end.